Hello everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are talking about almost like an annual theme today for our program, but there's some different news this time. Our subject today is jail contracting, and joining us for our show is somebody who's had his finger and hand on the legislation that has currently been involved in the process, Senator Darren Owens. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank you.
We also have Sheriff Tracy Glover from Kane County, who's the Kane County Sheriff, and an old-time warrior for jail funding and contracting, Commissioner Leland Pollock from Garfield County. Thank you all for joining me for this conversation. Just before the show, Senator, you said something very interesting, is that even you as a legislator had a little bit of confusion between jail contracting and COP. The people up here in Salt Lake City hear a lot about COP, condition of probation, and they think that's what all this jail reimbursement is about. It's really quite a different thing between jail contracting and condition of probation. I think it would do well to let our audience know a little bit about it. Anybody want to take a crack at trying to distinguish the two?
How about the sheriff?
Yeah, I could take a stab at it, Chad. A contract inmate is an inmate that committed a crime, went to court, got sentenced to the state prison as their sentence of incarceration, and then they got contracted out to a county facility as a Department of Corrections inmate. Condition of probation inmate's a little bit different in that they committed a crime, went to court, and as a condition of their probation, they were sentenced to the county jail rather than going to prison. It also could be someone who is out on probation or parole that reoffends and then gets placed back into the county jail for a period of time. And that's a condition of probation, or often referred to as a reimbursement inmate.
So why would you have a reimbursement? I mean, why would a judge sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to send you to jail instead of to prison? It could be the same crime.
Yeah, it could be, and it's a discretionary thing with the courts and how they want to handle those sentencing guidelines. More and more inmates are sentenced to county jail as a condition of probation, or let out on probation, and so we deal with those factors. But those are the differences, and they're contracted at a different rate. It's widely thought by the legislature and by counties, I believe, that a condition of probation inmate is a inmate that is a partnership responsibility between the county and the state. And so it's contracted at a different rate than a contract inmate, which is more of a state responsibility.
So usually COP happens within the county where the offense took place within that district court.
That's correct.
Okay. What is, on the contracting side, what has been the biggest problem with contracting as far as how did we get contracting in the first place? Anybody got a little history?
Well, yeah, I can tell you exactly how it happened. It was actually a good partnership with the state and the counties to take these inmates. I think it started out originally at 1,500 inmates from the state prison and put them out in the counties. And that was a good partnership. And it's still a good partnership. Here is the problem. The counties, the funding has not been enough to pay for the housing of that inmate. And so what we've tried to do is get that rate up to where we're not having to subsidize out of county general fund money to house a state inmate, because ultimately it's a state inmate. I mean, at the Point of the Mountain or in Gunnison, it costs them, they have to build the facility, construction costs, all of that, and then house the inmate. So it's a good savings to the state, but we're trying to get that rate up to where we don't have to subsidize anymore.
So even if you got to a point where your rate was covered, the cost of taking an inmate for, not a serious offender, but a medium or light risk, is where the counties pick up that slack. That is a smaller cost than putting that same prisoner in a state facility, even if you were being paid full?
Well, it could be, but it depends. Now, there's one thing that we do, and the state does this. They do programming. We do programming. So it really depends on if you're going to bring that inmate in, what you're going to do with that inmate. Are you going to give it, is it Tracy going to give him programming, or you just, you know, we get the reputation that we just warehouse inmates. That is not true. We have all kinds of different programs. I mean, even screen printing in Garfield County, they learn how to run a business. So that's a good question, Chad, but at the end of the day, the counties, the reason we're up here all the time, and you know, Commissioner Whitney's not with me today, but he's with me every year up here, and we keep coming back, is we just want to get that fair rate to where we don't have to take money out of our general fund and subsidize that state inmate. Well, and I think Darren helped us get a long ways in that direction.
I think the mood and the sponsors of the Senate have changed significantly. When Senator Hilliard was in, I remember having a conversation with him where he said, in my opinion, even if it's a state inmate, it's fully a county responsibility, and that was just his attitude about it, which probably makes it difficult. But anyway, I think we're going to take a quick break here because we've covered what we're talking about, and come back and talk about what the senator has worked on next, and find out what hurdles we've crossed here on the county seat. We'll be right back with the topic of jail funding. Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about jail funding, particularly for contract jails. We have a sheriff that does contracting in his jail with us for our conversation today. We managed in 2021 to get a new piece of legislation through, thanks to the senator. When you were first approached about running this legislation, what was your reaction to trying to do? And tell us a little bit about what the architecture of your bill is.
Oh, thanks, Chad. I was overwhelmed to begin with when I was assigned to be the Executive Offices and Criminal Justice Chair in the Senate, Appropriations Chair. So that put me in immediate contact with this group. And a citizen legislature, we have our space, and I come from the education world, so I had to get up to speed real quick. There's been a lot of good work done in this, but it was kind of like stepping into a match, a boxing ring between two heavyweight fighters in the 15th round, and I'm the new official. And there's a lot of fatigue on both sides, and they've been having at it. And so I took on the role to see if, could we find a pause here for a minute, and let's try to find middle ground. So we did some research and found that originally the agreement was that the state should pay up to 70% of its rate to the counties. There would be cost savings, but then the counties wouldn't be subsidizing, hopefully not at all, but as heavily as they have been. So, you know, I connected a lot with these gentlemen and others that were representing them, and we tried to find a place that we could go forward, and landed on the legislation of jail contracting this year, that we're going to go 3 years forward at the same rate. We brought it up to 70%. That's been the goal from the beginning. We have it there this year. And we're going to find out if that works or not over 3 years. We have a subcommittee put together that for 3 years we're going to study this and try to get the partnership. It's always been a partnership, but get them aligned instead of against each other. And that's the role I kind of took on as the official in the ring.
So what was the biggest hurdle as far as getting through this? What was the part that seemed most broken?
Yeah, the fatigue on both sides. So in the legislature, you need 38 votes in the House and 15 in the Senate, and leadership on both sides. So getting all of that aligned and in support of this idea is not an easy task. So working with both sides, trying to show that this is a good year for it, and looking at what the good has happened, the value of the partnership. The state cannot exist without the counties. We need them. And the counties rely upon this funding, but they can't be supporting the state inmates, and especially these rural counties that don't have a very big tax base to choose from. So that was the struggle.
Have you've got more knowledge about this than anybody long-term, Leland. Have you ever been at 70% in I don't think we've ever been there in the 10 years I've been following this.
No, we've subsidized pretty much all along, and thanks to Senator Owens, he's kind of become our new champion. We've subsidized all along. I mean, when I started out up here, I mean, I was in first year I was a commissioner. I got a call from Mike Noel, Representative Noel, and I was in Washington, D.C., and he said, you got to get back here and help me fight for jail contracting money. And I thought, like you did, what's that? And I think it was about $41 a day back then, 11 years ago. So we've never made it there. He got us really close this year, farther than I can ever remember anybody, you know, thanks to Senator Owens.
So if you're truly at 70% of the state rate, how much help is that going to give to Kane County in their contracting this year? What do you anticipate? You've got to look at the budget.
Yeah, if all of my inmate beds were full for the entire year, that increase would amount to around $300,000 for Kane County, which would take us up into the range, in theory, that would help us make us whole, and we wouldn't be subsidizing, at least not on a large scale, the operation. So, yeah, that would be beneficial. I think there are some, you know, hurdles that we'll face going forward with funding primarily. I will say the senator did an excellent job this year of getting support. I mean, I think he had pretty much unanimous support on the House floor and the Senate floor for this bill and for the work he did moving this forward for the next 3 years. The next 3 years of study will be interesting. I think we need to really build a partnership, develop a partnership even further, even though we do have a good relationship now. But at the end of the day, I think we've got to try to get this funding category into the base budget. That's one of the goals of the sheriffs. Maybe toward the end of that 3 years, it would be nice to be in the base budget so that we're not arguing. As the senator mentioned, the fatigue is great on this issue. And if we could get into the base budget so the 10th day of the legislature, this funding issue is resolved, much like education, that would be helpful.
So did you have to rate a lot of different buckets to get this cobbled together? You said it was a pretty good year for money for the state, and I've heard that. But, you know, an operational budget for, I don't know, what, 20 counties? How many counties are contracting?
Yeah, I think 19 or maybe 20 now. Yeah, I think
okay.
so.
So, you know, that's a pretty big chunk of change.
Yeah.
How'd you find it?
Prayer. Really, that was part of it. But what we got creative, and you know, the state had a good surplus of one-time money, and kudos to the legislature, folks. It's we get our fair share of criticism, but boy, people are coming here for a reason, and we're coming out of this pandemic in such a good spot. So with that one-time money, we didn't have ongoing money to apply to this. So we took the 3 years and attached one-time money to this for 3 years. So we put legs under it for 3 years while we work together and align it so that in 3 years now we can come out of it hopefully in the base budget and moving forward with ongoing funding.
So you're able to take this surplus from this year and actually carry it forward technically into the next 2 fiscal years while you try and find a solution and analyze it. Right. What do you think the challenges are going to be to you know, convince people that this should be a base budget thing?
Yeah, there are a few challenges to that. I think you know, the notion of putting a funding stream like this into the base budget is pretty permanent, makes it pretty permanent, which could be a little bit scary going forward. But you know, again, I think the fatigue over this funding issue is great enough that, as evidenced by the votes in the House and the Senate and the communication with leadership that Senator Owens had, they would like to solve this problem. I truly believe that is the flavor of the legislature, is to get this problem solved. They clearly have a lot of confidence in Senator Owens and putting him in the role he's in with that appropriations committee. And I think it's a great start. I think it's a program we can work with and hopefully get to that end.
We're going to take another quick break. We'll come back. We'll pick up our conversation here on jail funding on the county seat. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the county seat. We are having a discussion today about contracting, jail funding, what the contracting counties are about. With this new round of funding, you've got a 3-year window to figure a few things out. You know, there was talk, and Leland mentioned this, that at the time that the new prison was being considered, that there was some talk about saying, let's just take all this back and build a great big prison. What is the advantage in having this contracting partnership relationship from any of your perspectives? How is this beneficial to keep the prison size down and spread some of this out?
And I'll speak to that. For one thing, you spread the inmates out across the state. And then Commissioner was talking earlier about programming, and different counties have different programming abilities. So if you have a strength in overcoming addiction, you might choose to send an inmate there to where they can get special care. The funding wise is, well, not funding, but as the inmates come in, you know, you never know how rapidly people are going to be incarcerated and then exit the system. So I've looked at the county jails as a shock absorber to the Department of Corrections, and as the numbers go up and down, then they can use the county jails to help soften that. It's a great benefit to the state. It's not always perfect because you know how many are you going to have in your facility each day, or how many meals and programming. It's a heavy lift on all corners. So. But I think we have the path forward now in the next 3 years, and there's some urgency to get it done because this is going to end, and we better be aligned, or the 15th round of the fight will probably be a knockout somewhere.
Are there some formula problems that some formula math that you need to go through on how to fund this and how to look at it? You know, because of that very issue. All the beds may not be full all year long. You referred to that, saying if they were, that would be great. Well, if they're not, then you're not getting as much money. How do you address that shock absorber issue in keeping the counties functioning smoothly?
So one of the great things,
Go ahead.
sorry, Commissioner, one of the great things about Senator Owen's bill is that it requires that the entire allocation gets spent toward jail contracting. And that's important because it captures the entire funding stream. And I believe the legislature always intended for this to be the case. But it captures the entire funding stream and makes that, distributes that out over the actual beds that are contracted for. So that's important. That's a bit of a fix to the formula. Going forward, the concerns will be, you know, whether we stick with an average or with a percentage of the state rate, or do we switch over and go to more of a county median rate that we base the actual rate off of? And that'll be part of the discussion that we have with the subcommittee that will study this over the next few years. That's probably going to be a big part of the discussion. The other issue that we encounter with the Department of Corrections, and this is an issue that they face, is as sentencing guidelines have changed, the type of inmate that gets incarcerated in the state prison changes. And if you will, they become a more difficult inmate to manage often. Maybe they're more dangerous or more violent, or maybe they have more medical issues or mental health issues or things like that. And so those issues are another thing that will be studied with this subcommittee between the sheriffs and the Department of Corrections to identify what inmates can go out under contract with the county jails, which ones make sense. Like in Kane County, for example, I contract for 166 Department of Corrections inmates. And I program, I fill a niche, if you will. I house sex offenders that require substance abuse treatment, which is kind of a narrow niche, but those are the inmates they send me. And we have a very robust residential treatment program, 12-month program that's in our facility. And we program about 100 inmates at a time there. And we track our recidivism rates, and we're really tied to those things and focused on those things. Those are things we'll study with this subcommittee.
Is the secret in finding funding for this going forward really an issue of finding a revenue source? I know the state said we're going to do alcohol education based on a tax on alcohol. It's something that's kind of fixed, and say, well, this is your pool of money that comes from this source of revenue. Is that a good solution, or schools get certain pools of money that are just allocated to them? How do you do that?
It could be. That's all on the table. It's hard to find that funding stream. And then you asked earlier, Chad, about what going to be a challenge. Well, in 3 years there will be a different legislature who might not, because of this 3-year hiatus, there might not be the knowledge or the fatigue on the legislative side to get this done and to find that funding. So all those things have to stay in front of us with leadership. It could be a number of things, but it really comes down to the dedication, I think, from the state and the counties together to find that place that works, whether it's a 70% or not. And because they need to be sustainable, but not really making money off of the program. So that's important. I mean, we don't want them subsidizing. So there has to be some cost savings, I believe, to the state, but also sustainable. And that's been the hard thing. Eric Hutchings, former Representative Hutchings, Jake Anderegg, Senator Anderegg, they've worked at this long and hard too, and put a lot in front of us that we're able to get to this legislation this year. So I give them credit, because there's been a lot of work out there. So I think if we can find that source, have the state's dedication to it, and put it in place under a budget, then the partnership can then ebb and flow together. As the economy's up and down, so is the funding, and we can go together instead of working against each other.
Excellent. We got like 30 seconds for a last comment. Anybody have something that they want to throw in?
No, it's just a good partnership. We need to stay with it. We need to find a way. Something that Utah should be proud of. No other state is doing this that I can think of, and Utah needs to be proud of this rather than be something that we were at odds over.
Okay. I think that's a perfect nail to hang the hat on at the end of the conversation. Thank you all for taking your time. Thank you for tuning into this. Remember, these conversations are important. Please share this with your friends and give us some feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, and we'll see you next week on The County Seat. Thank you for watching The County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.